Now, this video is kind of a follow-up or clarification on a video I did yesterday on November 10th, 2025. I did a video on the Israeli No. 4 series low metallic anti-personnel mine. I knew before I even recorded that video that I would get a bunch of troll comments on that because of, well, definitely because of the country that manufactured that mine. And when I let people know that the United Nations and humanitarian groups are reporting that they're coming across fresh minefields that appear to have been laid by the Israeli Defense Force. I knew that there were certain groups in the United States that would not want that information out there. Now, I don't know if those groups are the source of some of the comments I got after that, or, you know, it could be a leftist organization trying to discredit me. One of the comments that I got on that video was from a channel that had no content, but it had Nazi iconography in thumbnail photos and such. So, who knows? But it does seem like there's been an active campaign to try to discredit that video after I posted it. Now, some of the comments I kept up if they were respectful. Ones that were outright calling me a liar, spreading disinformation and that stuff, and outright insulting me, there were a few of those. Yeah, you pricks all got banned. Now, the thing that they primarily latched onto from that video was during the inspection. Before emplacing that mine, I mentioned that you must inspect the explosive because the explosive in the Israeli No. 4 mine is cast TNT. And I mentioned that you need to inspect the TNT, make sure it is not degrading, it is not leaking any liquidy or jelly type substances or gel-like substances from the explosive. That is telling you that the explosive has degraded and is no longer safe. That mine must be destroyed because it is not safe enough to transport. Now, I was trained at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri at the engineer school before it was the Manson, the Maneuver Support Center. Back when it was the engineer school, it actually hadn't been the engineer school that long at that point because the engineer school had recently come over from Fort Belvoir. And when I went through my training as an engineer there, you have your initial classes on demolitions. You get trained on the different types of explosives that are available, what's its strengths, what's its weaknesses, what to watch for, that type of stuff when there's problems with it and you should not use it. Things like the cratering charges that we're using at that time, the explosive content was ammonium nitrate, and if there is a damage on the container, indications that there's rust on the container, do not use it because the ammonium nitrate is very hygroscopic. It will suck up water out of the air, neutralizing the explosive capabilities of that charge. When we were taught on TNT, one of the things it was mentioned to us is that the TNT that the U.S. military used most of it was manufactured in the 1940s, and that we had to be really careful when we got it to inspect it. If we seen any type of leakage on the explosive blocks, didn't matter if it was the quarter-pound, half-pound, or one-pound blocks, we were told do not use them. They had to be destroyed because that leakage was nitroglycerin. So that's what I was trained over 30 years ago. Now, I had one person commented that only dynamite leaks nitroglycerin. He thinks I'm wrong about TNT. TNT doesn't degrade. I told the person that, well, I am trained and very experienced in the use of explosives. And I have many stories about explosives that had degraded, resulting in unexpected results on the range. And I also had stories of dealing with TNT that had degraded. Now, another person commented after that they work with explosives compounds. They told me I was wrong, that only dynamite uses nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is not used in the manufacture of TNT. Yes, I am aware dynamite, at least civilian dynamite, is a mixture of diatomaceous earth and nitroglycerin. Military dynamite is not. Military dynamite is actually a mix of other compounds that are far safer than civilian dynamite, and it has a far longer shelf life. Military TNT is also not the same as commercial TNT. There is a difference in the mix. And from the research I was doing today, looking some stuff up in the manuals, the actual mixture of military TNT has evolved, has changed over time. And World War II, they basically made TNT any way they could because the U.S. military needed large quantities of it, and so did our allies. Now, I did come across one piece of information here from a manual on ordnance that is filled with TNT. This page is from TM 9-1300-200, Ammunition General, date October of 1969, but this is change 5. Now, under this page here, which is about TNT, you have this section up in here. Exudation. When stored in warm climates or during warm summer months, some ammunition loaded with TNT may exude an oily brown liquid. This exudate oxidizes out around the threads at the nose of the projectile and may form a pool on the floor. The exudate is flammable and may contain particles of TNT. Pools of exudate should be removed. Now, in the actual manual on military explosives, I couldn't find the actual inspection manual. I know I have it, I just couldn't come across it. But in TM 9-1300-214, military explosives, which is really a rundown on the chemical characteristics and scientific characteristics of different types of military explosives, that manual is primarily meant for the engineers that are designing new ordnance. In that, it did say that the shelf life of TNT is 20 years. Well, if the TNT was manufactured during World War II in the 1940s, that shelf life of 20 years puts it in the 1960s. And we were still using TNT from World War II up past 9/11. So past September 11, 2001. Yeah, that's way past its 20-year shelf life, isn't it? And I got some stories on that. Actually, I'll give you multiple stories on different types of things I've seen go wrong with military explosives that does degrade. Now, with TNT, I have two stories together on this one. Now, after I handled TNT at AIT, I did not handle it again till the late 90s after I returned to the United States from overseas. My first demolitions range in the United States was at Fort Riley, Kansas with the Big Red 1, the 1st Infantry Division, back at that time. Now, everyone had to get recertified. This was our yearly certification on demolitions. As part of this, we had written tests we had to do. We also had practical exercises. We had to, we were given a piece of explosive and we had to explain its characteristics. Basically, all those things we were taught in basic training and AIT we had to read back that we still remembered that. We still remembered the capabilities of the charges, what its weakness is, what its strength is, things to look out for. Well, at this particular range, my platoon was running it. And when the Hemet showed up, which is a large 8-wheeled transport, showed up and offloaded the demo, I was part of the team offloading the truck, pulling it off, putting it into the demo supply point. This truck had come from the post ASP, ammunition supply point. It was brought to us by the battalion support platoon. Well, the support platoon NCOIC that was dropping off the demo to us mentioned that we had a case of TNT that literally had been found in the back of one of the storage bunkers behind pallets of C4 that wasn't even on the post inventory list. And the unit running the post ASP wanted us to destroy it. So we took that crate off, we put it in the demo supply point. And then, we start the range. Now, I did help out inside that supply point because I had a lot more knowledge on demolitions than most of the people there. So the NCO, my squad leader that was in charge of it, he wanted me issuing some of the stuff out. When it got to the point that our platoon sergeant said we should bring forward that case of TNT, we were supposed to carry it up to the range so that it could get issued out and destroyed. This crate was made out of wood. The manufacture date on that TNT, I remember, was 1945. I think May of 1945, but I'm not certain on that. I do remember it was 1945. It was an old wooden crate and the lid was held on with wing nuts. So this was the original crate. So I and another soldier working the demo supply point, we had to take that TNT up to the range, walk it down the road up to the point where we were going to do the blast. So I grabbed one side of the crate, he grabbed the other. Platoon sergeant is standing right there overseeing what we're doing. We pick up the crate of TNT and we get it no more than 1 foot to 2 feet off the ground and the crate falls apart. I'm not talking the bottom falls out the crate, I'm talking the wood on the sides of the crate split going all the way around. The contents of the crate then hit the ground hard. And there was a reaction from the platoon sergeant, there was also a reaction from us. But the thing that really got us is the fact that even though this crate filled with 1-pound TNT blocks hit the ground hard, the TNT blocks did not fall off the pile. They were glued together with, as they call it in this, exudate from the explosive blocks. The platoon sergeant had a bit of a fit and I think damn near filled his pants, as we almost did too. So one of the soldiers went to the LT to notify him because he was the range safety officer of what happened. The platoon sergeant wanted us to take that crate of TNT up to the range, carefully holding it from the bottom of the crate this time, since apparently the handles won't work because they're still part of the crate that was in our hands, not part of the crate that was on the ground. He wanted us to carry it up to the range, prime it with a couple blocks of C4 and just blow that bitch inside one of the craters up there. And don't worry about keeping the crate. Now the lieutenant showed up because he was the range safety officer. And he started having a little discussion with the platoon sergeant, pointing out to him that we have to turn in that crate as dunnage. That's the material that's left over. The packaging and that stuff that comes with the explosives gets returned as dunnage to the ASP, the ammunition supply point, as proof that that piece of munitions was expended. Now, the platoon sergeant tried explaining to him that, sir, this crate is not even on the bill of lading, the inventory that you signed for. This was sent extra. But he just would not listen because he was a brand new butter bar. We had to save the crate. We couldn't get rid of it. We had to somehow remove the explosive blocks from the crate and then turn in the crate itself to the ammunition supply point for accountability. Even though the ammunition supply point for the post didn't even have that crate on the inventory for the post, it wasn't supposed to exist, so really didn't need to have that crate back as proof. Eventually, that crate did make its way up onto the range when the lieutenant wasn't looking and was made to disappear. Because we knew damn well that the post ammunition supply point, the unit running it, did not want it back. It wanted it gone. So we made it disappear. Eventually, in a big flash with one of the other blasts. Now, after the LT walked off to handle the current blast that was going on, the platoon sergeant talked to me and the other soldier that had handled that crate of TNT. And he asked us to check ourselves out, make sure we didn't have anything on our uniforms. Not, there was no liquid, no gel type stuff on our uniforms, nothing on our hands. And if there was anything on our hands from when we tried putting the crate back together, anything squeezed out from that giant glob of gel that used to be TNT blocks, that we had to wash our hands very thoroughly with soapy water. And then he, after we did that, he told us a little story about when he was a brand new private in the late 1970s. He talked about he was part of the crew at the demolition supply point for his unit at one of those ranges. And they had multiple cases of TNT that they had to use as part of their demolition certification that year. And he kind of forgot about inspecting the blocks for any leakage. And those blocks of TNT he was handing out, which was also manufactured in World War II, at this point over 30 years past its manufacture date, and over 10 years past its shelf life date, those blocks were leaking. And he would get this gel on his hands as he's handing out the TNT blocks, and he was wiping it on his uniform. Now, sometime during the range, his platoon sergeant noticed his uniform was a little wet, a little slimy looking, and asked him, hey, what is that? And then he explained, oh, that's stuff that some type of goo that was on the TNT blocks. His platoon sergeant made him strip his uniform off so that all he was wearing was his t-shirt, his drawers, socks, and his boots. That platoon sergeant then chewed him out and told him that that is pure nitroglycerin and your uniform is completely covered in it. That uniform was then taken up onto that range and blown up in one of the blasts with a couple explosive blocks to make sure nothing was left of it, because it was thoroughly contaminated with that exudate from those TNT blocks. Fast forward to the late 1990s, 20-some years later, the TNT blocks we're using are now 50 years plus past their manufacture date, over 30 years past their shelf life, and Yeah, they were melting down like a motherfucker inside that crate. So he told us that story and told us never forget that, and told us what the reaction would be if we did ever get that exudate, or as he was calling it, nitroglycerin, on our uniforms. So, did I handle TNT after that point in the late 1990s? Only once or twice, and the TNT blocks we had then didn't look that good. They were also manufactured in the 1940s, but luckily those weren't leaking. At least not enough that we had to worry about them. So, yeah. TNT, according to the U.S. Army, has a 20-year shelf life. Past that, it will degrade. Now, I'm sure someone's going to point out to me that, well, it won't degrade if it's stored properly. There's another catch on that one. Do you know how the U.S. military stores ammunition? Ammunition is stored in concrete bunkers that, for the most part, were manufactured, or they weren't manufactured, they were constructed in the 1940s. Ammunition bunkers for the U.S. military to this day are giant concrete structures which are covered in earth and have extra thick metal doors on one end. There is no electricity allowed inside these bunkers. Not for lights, not for heating, not for air conditioning. Because any electricity coming into those bunkers is a potential fire hazard. So the U.S. military does not allow electricity in the ammunition storage bunkers. And that includes the bunkers that store explosives. Because a fire inside one of those would not be a good thing. So that means explosives stored on military bases is stored in a giant concrete bunker that the temperature inside that bunker varies based on the time of year, to include during wintertime where those bunkers become giant deep freezers. So we have a continuous thawing and refreezing cycle of that ammunition year after year after year after year. Now, what have I seen with explosives that have gone through that? Well, I ended up with, at my last demolitions range before I retired, they pulled some cases of C4 out of the bunker at this post and gave it to us to use at the range. This range, we were once again our yearly qualification, and we ordered extra demo too because we were also doing training on breaching charges, how to blow open doors, blow holes in walls, that type of stuff. Now, no TNT at that range. That one was primarily C4, along with our specialty charges like shapes, cratering charges, and Bangalores. Now, the C4 that we got, the manufacture dates on that stuff was 1960s. We are now well past 2000. Now, the C4 blocks look just fine until we tried slitting them so that we could prime them with demolitions knots using deck cord. That C4 was so degraded, it literally broke into chunks because of the way it had been getting stored for decades. C4 degrades also. So you're trying to cut into the block to do a slit so you could put your demo knot inside it, and as you're cutting it, it's breaking apart into chunks. So what we ended up doing is we told the troops, don't put the demo knot on the inside, prime it on the outside. Do a wrap on the outside of the correct knot. same as you would a TNT charge, which you don't use that type of wrap on C4 because it doesn't quite work. It works somewhat, but it mostly just cuts the C4, doesn't set it off like it's supposed to. That's why you put the knot on the inside with C4. Well, yeah, when we did the our initial blast, everyone getting their 1 pound or their one stick of C4, priming it, setting it off, we ended up with chunks of C4 all over the fucking range that did not detonate because it literally got cut by the C4 knot. The C4 got cut by the det cord wraps and spread chunks of C4 gravel all over the place, which we did not tell range control about. Actually, what we ended up doing is getting shovels and having the soldiers, you know, shovel it into one of the craters, and then we buried it. Not the safest to do because C4, once it goes through a blast, it gets sensitized, making it very dangerous. But we kind of figured that if it got blown to chunks that looked like fucking gravel and it didn't go off, it probably wasn't that sensitive anymore. So we just buried the shit. I think ultimately we ended up putting a cratering charge on top of it to try to destroy it that way, but I don't remember. Another thing we had at that range, the det cord that we were issued, the detonating cord, I think the manufacturer on that one was 1970s, I want to say, because it was green det cord. It wasn't the weird colored stuff that was manufactured in the 60s and before. That stuff had also gone through that same freezing and thawing cycle for year after year, decade after decade. Well, when we tried pulling the det cord off of the spools to issue it out, the rubberized protective layer on the outside crumbled off. And when it crumbled off, the RDX powder inside the det cord went with those crumbles. And we had a lot of misfires with that det cord also. It didn't go right. So what we ended up doing was we took the ends off the spools, spooled it into a giant trash bag, and then primed the whole trash bag with a few blocks of C4 that weren't as degraded as the other stuff and blew it up in the crater. Some other things that I have seen with demolitions from the way it's stored by the U.S. military. One is the Bangalore that never end. This was after September 11th. I want to say it was early 2003 because we were going through doing some certifications before going to the desert. Well, we got a case of Bangalores manufactured in 1944. These Bangalores were not Comp B, they were Comp A6. These were the old ones, and the difference you can tell on them is the end caps are different. That's one way to tell. And, well, we primed these Bangalores, and we primed them the way you're supposed to. We put them out on the range, set them off. Well, when it went off, all it blew off was the booster charge at the end of Bangalore. The rest of the Bangalore was still sitting on the ground. So that's kind of an oh shit moment. So then you go grab some C4, you get your misfire charge, and you put out a misfire charge on the Bangalore just a little bit past where the end was torn apart in the previous explosion to hopefully set the rest of it off. We set off that misfire charge, and the only section it destroyed was the section of Bangalore that it was over the top of, and we still had more Bangalore left that had not detonated. We went misfire charge after misfire charge till literally all we had was the very end of the Bangalores, the other booster on the other end. And each Bangalore, I think, went through at least 4 separate blasts to destroy them. Because the explosive inside was so old, had degraded so much inside the storage bunkers, it was completely desensitized. That same range, we also had some cratering charges that were also manufactured in the 1940s. How the hell these things survived so goddamn long, I have no clue. These were ones that came in the old wooden crates. They were filled with ammonium nitrate. These were the really old ones. It was very obvious. There's differences. You can look at them just visually between the really old ones and the new ones. It's not just the fillers. The new ones have a Comp B filler. The old ones had ammonium nitrate. Well, we put them in the ground. You put with it a bag of 10 pounds of explosive as an additional booster charge when you do your road crater. Well, we get the blast done and we go forward to check the range. And we notice as we're getting closer, the road crater isn't as deep as it should be. And we get closer and we see that about half of the damn cratering charges are still sitting in the ground. The only part that was destroyed was the part on top that bag of C4 blocks was in and placed right next to. And we literally had ammonium nitrate spread all over the fucking range. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, ammonium nitrate that was inside those charges was manufactured from chicken shit. It's purified and that stuff, cleaned, and then it's, you know, a few other chemicals added to it and that stuff to bring up its sensitivities and that type of stuff, make it more energetic. Yeah, we ended up shoveling that ammonium nitrate into the fucking pit and then putting a whole bunch of C4 on top of each of those cratering charges and blowing them up again until there was no more pieces of cratering charge left inside the hole. There were still bits of ammonium nitrate laying across the range, but you know, it doesn't really matter because it's very hygroscopic. It will literally suck moisture straight out of the air and desensitize itself and then literally go back to just being fancy chicken shit. So it will, you know, it'll disappear. It'll compost itself into the ground. So that was interesting. I've also dealt with M15 anti-tank mines that I know I've mentioned in the past when I did videos on that. You'd put a piece of tape on it and you'd mark on there every time that mine was armed and disarmed during training. And once it got up to around 30 to 36, you were supposed to destroy that mine. Well, I do remember one duty station I was at, the one I was at during 9/11. We had our mine certification for that year. When we had M15s, we had M21s, and the M15 I had 30-some hash marks on that tape on top of the mine. And the mine itself showed clear evidence of rust, bubbling rust on the side around the seam. So that mine would not have been declared usable and was being used only for training. And hopefully, I pray to God, was destroyed at a range not long after we turned them back into the ASP. So, yeah. So there you go. There's some stories of me and explosive materials over the years that because of age did not work correctly. I've had some rather interesting experiences with that. And I've also done things with explosives that is not supposed to be possible. Shit, I wish I had printed off the picture. What the second to last demo range I did in the Army before retiring, we had a old M47 tank on the range that people would use to blow holes in and that stuff, you know, using shape charges and that type of thing, and they'd practice blowing off chunks off of it and that type of stuff. Well, at that range, I did something with C4 that's not really supposed to be possible. I took C4 blocks, primed it with a Uli knot, and I stacked them on the hull of that tank, that M47. When my charge went off, it had literally turned a chunk of the hull into a platter charge that shot through the other side of the tank. And that was just from a few blocks of C4. That shouldn't have happened. If you understand how explosive works, explosions take the path of least resistance. The armor should have focused it outward because it wasn't a proper jet for a shape charge. This was just a bulk charge I had put together, and I tried focusing the blast into the armor, and apparently I did it just right that I literally blew a hole into the armor and turned the armor itself into a platter charge, which breached the other side like a fucking EFP. And you got to remember, this armor isn't very thin. This is tank armor. So there you go, some experiences from me on explosives, and a little explanation on why I say you need to be careful with older explosives, because things may not go the way you expect. Now, degraded TNT, I personally would not want to handle it. I've been trained, don't touch it. And I've followed those rules for years. So if I come across a mine or piece of ordnance that is leading exudate, I'm not going to do it because it's not safe. And because you cannot guarantee that that explosive block will work the way it's supposed to. And you run the risk that that explosive may be sensitized and dangerous, and you handling it may set it off. Now, if you don't want to believe me, you want to handle explosives, any way you want to, hey, it's your choice. You want to take a block of TNT, a real one, you want to set fire to the end, try using it as a candle, go ahead. Let me know what happens after you do it, if you can still talk. You want to take C4, set it on fire, and then start hitting it with a hammer to see what will happen? Go ahead. Let me know the results. You want to take det cord, wrap it around your neck, prime it, attach a fuse igniter to it, and see what will happen when you just set off the igniter, don't have a cap or anything in there? Go ahead. Let me know what happens. I'm curious. I would really like to know if you want to do these unsafe acts. That is completely on you. But I'm going to go off of my training and my experience of handling military demolitions for 2 decades. And my experience and my training says, don't do that. It's not safe. You is going to get hurt. But hey, you don't believe me? Then go ahead, do what you want to do. Become that idiot that the rest of us will laugh at as we read the news story. It's your call, your choice, it's your life. Listen to me on how to safely handle the stuff, or don't. Your choice. You want to take that chance? You want to see who's more correct on how to properly handle this stuff? Someone who did it for a couple decades, or Hollywood? Your choice. Let me know what the results are. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot militia movements, always remember, essayons.